Tag TV, and Tag Radio. Technology now has a voice of innovation and information. Get it on www.tagtvonline.com. Massively multiplayer online games, MMOs. They're not your grandfather's Pong or your dad's online solitaire game. MMOs are video games capable of supporting hundreds or thousands of players simultaneously. Played on the Internet, they feature one persistent world, yet they are not necessarily played on a personal computer. Most of the newer game consoles include Xbox 360, PlayStation Portable, Nintendo DS, and Wii. Access the Internet and offer MMOs as well. Imagine the challenge to develop the engines needed to run a successful MMO, with millions of players and graphical, physical, and network engines. Most developers create their own, while others leverage MMOs engines using middleware. Then there is the issue of servers that can handle tens of thousands of players, several thousand, often active simultaneously. Role-playing games, first-person shooter, real-time strategies, and on and on. Then there's real-world simulation and alternative reality games, some that even invite live game modification by players and peer-to-peer customization. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, October 21st, 2008, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. Massively multiplayer online games. Experts say they are driving new technological capabilities that are already impacting our workplace realities. In the state of Georgia, it's betting big bucks in national incentive leadership to recruit gaming developers, gaming-skilled programmers, and aiding startups to incubate new gaming businesses, all targeted at making Atlanta and key Georgia cities like Savannah and Athens industry centers for what everyone is predicting will be the biggest segment of the film and entertainment business in the next 20 years. Enter Hi-Rez Studios, started in 2005 to create online interactive entertainment, and is in the process of developing an industry-buzzing, new action-packed, massively multiplayer online game titled Global Agenda. Tino Tech talks with MMO Global Agenda executive producer Todd Harris, as today's issue is all about development, deployment, and the service challenges of massively multiplayer online games and the potential megabucks and new jobs for Georgia they are predicted to create. Todd has over 15 years of technological leadership experience and is an active industry leader and contributor to the growing Georgia gaming industry. A software engineer, Todd managed next-generation product development at NCR, Radiant Systems, and Blue Cube Software. From virtual worlds to virtual economies with virtual currency, just what is the future for MMOs, and who are the pioneers in Georgia's emerging online interactive gaming industry? As Tino speaks with Hi-Rez Studios COO and executive producer of the action-packed MMO Global Agenda, Todd Harris.
Todd, thanks for joining me on Tech Talk.
Hi, Tino. It's a pleasure to talk with you today.
Well, let's jump in. You guys have a big event coming up in November, and it's also for a good cause. And it has an unusual name. You and I talked a little bit about this, and I'm going to say Owning for a Cure. But tell us a bit about the event and the name and who should attend.
Yes, maybe the TAG listeners are not familiar with what they call the leet speak of video game slang, but
some will be.
Owning for a Cure or Poning for a Cure, either one. And the name came from, again, a slang term that's basically a boast for defeating an opponent in a video game competition. And we used it because this is tied in with a great cause. We're teaming up with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, whose mission is basically to defeat or pwn blood cancer, of course. So the event is free, but certainly there are many donation activities there. And really, it's a great opportunity for anyone curious about the video game industry, the technologies involved, the sophistication of the tools involved, the skill set necessary to produce a massively multiplayer online game, or certainly for the public who just want to come in and play a great game for a good cause and actually get a sneak peek into the development process of a massively multiplayer online game. Global Agenda has been 3 years in development now, and we've really been operating in stealth mode up until now, defining the game and refining the game. And this is going to be the first public preview, and with all the support and activity around the game industry in Georgia, we wanted to make it a local event in the Roswell area for folks to come and check it out. So the event itself is Saturday, November 8th, from 12 to 5 at the Computer Arena in Roswell. And it's going to consist of hours of games, our game, Global Agenda. There'll be other games there as well, silent auction to benefit the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. There'll be music. There'll be food. And this is something that we're doing jointly with the Georgia Film, Music, and Digital Entertainment Office. So it's certainly a coming out party for our own game and also, I think, somewhat the video game industry here in Georgia.
Well, that's great, and it sounds like a lot of fun. Is it a kind of a beta test as well, or you guys have been through, I guess, most of that, but will you take feedback and respect of how it goes?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, a lot of our process and really what we think is key to making a great game is to test throughout the process. So really even the first 3 months into the project when we had nothing but a character moving around on the screen, we were doing a lot of play testing, really applying some of the agile methodologies that come from the business software community into game development. That's been a little later to pick those up. And so we literally play test the game either ourselves or we bring in external folks every single day in the studio. And so this is just another opportunity for us to, again, kind of get feedback and refine the game. Admittedly, there's already been a lot of testing up until this point, but people will get a sneak peek into the game at this stage, and when it launches, some things will certainly be different because it is really at an alpha level in terms of games, even pre-beta. It's kind of an alpha level in that all the content's not there yet, but the gameplay is very representative.
So going back to the entire industry here, Frank Bayer gave you a good introduction, certainly, and talked about the growth of the industry and really put a stake in the ground in terms of how fast it is going to grow. So I think people are probably wondering, well, why video games and how confident are you in terms of this growth? And tell us a bit about the industry.
Sure. Good question. I think most of your listeners are certainly familiar with computer and video games, being a part of mass media consumption at this point. 65% of American households are playing computer or video game regularly, but certainly I think people tend to be surprised by the size of the industry. In the U.S. alone, it's a $9.5 billion industry, which is up 6% or so from last year. So it really is in its entirety bigger than the motion picture industry at this point already. Another thing that Frank mentioned in the introduction is Georgia as an active participant in the industry, which is certainly great to see. Today, most of the video game activity is still on the West Coast, but Georgia is really a frontier environment for video games and particularly MMO development, and there's a few reasons for that. One, certainly a friendly economic climate for business in general, combined with a recent Entertainment Investment Act that really incents studios to conduct video game development in Georgia with Georgia labor through tax credits, et cetera. Two, just a high quality of new talent trained to work in the video game industry, whether that's universities such as Georgia Tech or UGA adopting and putting together curriculum, including even PhD programs, if you can believe it, in video game development. It's called interactive entertainment, but it really is applicable at its core to video game development. And then certainly on the art side, a number of nationally known institutions such as the Savannah College of Art and Design, AIA, et cetera, that are producing students that really want to get into video games. So Georgia is certainly an active participant in this thriving industry. And probably the third point is that people are somewhat surprised is just the sophistication of the technology involved in video games. It's not certainly video games jobs are not sitting on your couch in your underwear playing video games. And really the tools and the technology sets in video games tend to be leading indicators of technologies that are seen in other business, both in terms of development tools and in terms of user applications. So video game jobs are great, sophisticated jobs for programmers and for artists. Thanks to video games, we probably have more employed artists than ever before in the history of the world. So it's quite an interesting and engaging industry.
And I guess industries like the Department of Defense are looking quite heavily into the whole area of gaming. And
that's right. That's an excellent point. There's really a whole adjacent industry that's sometimes termed serious games, which is taking gaming technologies and kind of the core aspect of a challenge developed in interactive form and applying that in military use, in corporate use, in education use. There's a whole body of thought now that really a good game is just a challenge where basically the goal is perfectly adapted to the skill set of the person going through the game. And so obviously that's applicable to everything from corporate training to military to even traditional education.
So moving on to MMOG, or massively multiplayer online games, that's a growing area within the game industry. And how does that differ from somebody going on their computer and just playing a video game?
Yeah, and our project, Global Agenda, is an MMOG. So MMOG, massively multiplayer online game, really different in terms of scope, both from the player standpoint and the technology standpoint. From a player standpoint, an MMOG is really about large groups interacting, and oftentimes it's more emergent behavior, social behavior, rather than a very scripted experience. So, in its most basic form, a single-player game is just me playing against the computer, and a multiplayer game may be a group of 5 or 10 people competing against others, but in a massively multiplayer online game, there are thousands or tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands all interacting in a persistent world, so that in some ways it's more like a virtual society than a traditional game. The big guy on the MMOG industry block is, of course, World of Warcraft. So there's over 11 million people playing, so bigger than Metro Atlanta in terms of number of players all interacting in this virtual world. And from a technology standpoint, an MMOG is also a more sophisticated offering and just larger in scope. Video games traditionally are C, C++ programming, and there's a lot of graphics programming, a lot of heavy math involved in just getting a good experience on a client PC or a client console, such as the Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3. But with an MMOG, it brings in all the back-end technologies that are more familiar to enterprise software developers, so databases and database servers and networking and web platforms and the scalability and supportability associated with keeping those systems up all the time. So it's a very interesting space in terms of game design for players and also the technical challenges.
And you had said your particular game, Global Agenda, is 3 years in the making, and so it's obviously got a lot of back-of-the-shop work being done and very sophisticated as far as that goes. And this alpha test in November, and then is there any prediction in terms of a rollout at this point, or are you still kind of working through that?
Well, these games typically have at least a 4-year development cycle, okay. And so if we were kind of on par with the industry, we'd expect something like that. But a lot depends on the testing itself, of course. We've actually, in addition to this public test, as I mentioned, we've been testing inside the studio, and we actually have a program with local Georgia folks to be able to pre-register for our beta, and we've let in a number of folks into our alpha. So we have added basically a couple hundred folks a month that test from home and help us flesh out the scalability and supportability and performance, as well as just making sure the thing is fun, because at the end of the day, that's one of the most important aspects. So that's going really well, really ahead of our expectations, which is one of the things that led us to go ahead and do this public event coming up in November.
Well, we're running out of time, but let's give our listeners one more chance to hear about the public event and hopefully attend the public event.
Yeah, we'd love to see, tag members and listeners out there. The event, one more time, is Saturday, November 8th. It's at the Computer Arena in Roswell. It's going to be from 12 to 5. We will have, in addition to public play, there'll be seminars there, actually going into quite deep detail on how characters for a video game are developed.